Welcome to Geopod, where we take a look at current events through geopolitical lenses. Today, we're talking about geopolitics, specifically the politics in the United States of America. We've got the elections coming up, and there's a lot of debate on who's out for our best interest and who would be the best to run our country. We've got some great people here to discuss what's going on. I'm Mr. Patterson, educator here at Coppell High School. Who else do we have around the table?
I'm Bhargav, student.
I'm Jia.
I'm Sathvik.
I'm Bilal, and today we have a special guest with us who's not part of our club, but has a lot of insight on the political news around us. Who are you, sir?
I'm Ray.
So today we're going to be talking about politics. It seems like in today's world, politics is all over the news, whether it's television, social media, etc. And people, even that can't vote, are involved, learning about things that the different candidates are doing. So the first question we want to talk about today, and this is going to be a very opinionated Geopod just because of the nature of politics and the different views our families have. The first thing I want to talk about is why is the 2016 election so widespread, even amongst the non-eligible voters? Why is everyone talking about it? I know elections are always very popular, but why specifically is this election so popular and everyone seems to talk about it?
Well, we have to take into consideration that we have some pretty, well-known candidates out there, like Donald Trump, who is currently the leading candidate in the Republican Party, and also Hillary Clinton, who's had previous scandals attached to her name and has quite a reputation.
I think the pervasiveness of politics in the current media right now is because of the power of fear. When the landscape first started for the 2016 election several months ago, many of these names were unknown, and then when controversial figures such as Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders came in, prompting radical changes to the way we govern ourselves in America, then we have a lot of people rallying behind these new ideas of motives and people who are disillusioned with the current state of government, so they want to see change, and these people provide an outlet for change. So now they're attracting a mass following of people who normally wouldn't engage in these sort of activities.
I think another thing we have to take into consideration is the extreme use of social media in today's world. Anytime something comes on the news today, it's all over social media within instances. And I know everyone loves to go and read, for example, Donald Trump's tweets, where he calls out a specific person and uses non-formal language. And in today's world of social media, everything gets posted on Facebook, Twitter, what each candidate's doing, where they're campaigning, and what their views are. And it seems like everyone has seemed to take an interest in politics because of the use of social media. Ray, any thoughts?
I think this election is particularly really interesting because, for a while we've been thinking, all right, Hillary Clinton versus Jeb Bush. And then a couple other people join and say, okay, well, they're afterthoughts. It's still going to be Clinton versus Bush. Then some political outsiders get in, some relatively unknown left-wing senator gets in with some pretty radical ideas, and then it just becomes a very high-stakes game, especially with the recent death of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Literally everything hangs in the balance. The presidency, the Senate, and now the Supreme Court. So really it depends. Whichever party has control of the government will have control for a very long time.
All right, so another reason why I think this election is particularly interesting is we have been used to Obama for 2 terms now, and he has done an excellent job with foreign affairs.
Like I said, this podcast will include a lot of disputes. Ray, you seem to make a face when Sathvik mentioned Obama's administration. Do you want to say something about it?
Well, I think Obama has done an okay job. I think time will tell how good his presidency was. A couple of years later, we'll look back. When he first came into office, he was hit with the financial crisis. And he did a pretty good job getting us out of that. But, subprime mortgages and, derivatives and all the stuff that caused it. So, and then as far as foreign policy goes, there has been several setbacks or problems that they've had with foreign policy, like with Libya and now with ISIS in Syria.
Speaking of foreign policy, though, we need to also take into account the international perception that the U.S. is going to send to the world regardless of whoever is elected as president. The international community isn't the biggest fan of Trump. I think the UK even banned him from going into the UK. So we have to take into account what's going to happen if our candidates are elected into office and how that's going to affect international affairs.
I think we can all agree that the main figure in this whole election is Donald Trump. He's all over the news. Everyone wants to know what he's doing, and even if you completely disagree with his views, you still will go watch his rallies or go look up what he's doing just because it interests you. So, Bhargav, why do you think Donald Trump is such a controversial figure? I know he says such unique things, and he may upset a lot of people, but it seems that he gets a lot of support. So why do you think the nation is supporting him?
I think Donald Trump is a controversial figure because he's more or less a fearmonger in my perspective. So I'm not sure if you guys agree with that, but I think he's a fearmonger. And certain people are very easy to persuade. Some people hear the things that Donald Trump says and they rally behind these causes. And so you see a lot of people who wouldn't engage in normal politics interacting with Donald Trump in a way that we haven't seen before. So we have a lot of very passionate voters for Donald Trump, and we have a lot of fringe groups who are supporting him. But that raises some questions as to whether or not the people who support Donald Trump are the most morally upstanding or socially accepting people.
I think in addition to that, it's the level of education that Trump supporters have about current issues such as things like immigration. Consensus has shown that people who support Trump and who support his ideas tend to be less aware of current issues like immigration that Trump often speaks about. And so perhaps that's also another reason why so many people rally behind them, because they're just not completely aware and educated of the actual current situation that's happening within the geopolitical realm dealing with immigration and things that Trump blatantly advocates for.
And I totally agree in some aspects to that. I think there are a lot of things that Donald Trump may say that he may just be saying, and he doesn't realize he doesn't have the authority to implement that. The most famously saying, I'm going to go build a wall. And he says he's going to get the Mexican government to pay for it. But whenever a reporter has asked him how, he just says, I'm just going to do it. Or he says, my people will do it. When clearly, even just recently in the news, there was news reports about past Mexican president saying, that would never happen. And like Bhargav said, the fear, he basically encompasses the negativity that has occurred throughout the past couple of years. He plays on people's fears of what the government's doing and what Obama's administration has done. And that really makes an impact on people, and then they throw support for him. His radical ideas like banning all Muslims until we figure out what's going on. What is figuring out going on? He doesn't normally explain what he's doing.
I think the reason why he's the center of this is because he is tapping in to the angry American. If you look at the voter turnout numbers, it's getting lower and lower each year because, as he says, people are giving up on the political process. They're giving up on elections because they know whether they vote Democrat or Republican, the same thing's going to happen. There's going to be a gridlock. There's going to be a guy who's going to make everyone happy in his rallies. There's going to be a guy who says, he's going to change everything. And then they're disillusioned. So he's really just tapping into the angry American right now. And that's why people who usually don't participate in politics are now suddenly interested, because he's brought in, because he's said these controversial things. The first thing he says, comes on the elevator of Trump Tower, announces he's running for president, starts talking about illegal immigrants.
But let's move on because we've talked a lot about Donald Trump. Let's move on to the Democrat side. Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton. Our thoughts?
All right, so Sanders, in my opinion, is definitely taking action towards the increase in wage gap between people of different socioeconomic status. So when we look at this, I see that he is trying to take an effort and trying to instigate this process, because Hillary is not paying attention to it as much as Sanders is going in towards it. Even if Sanders doesn't get elected, he's definitely bringing this ideal or his proposition that would actually help our economy fluctuate more, because we would have that decrease in wage gap.
Patterson, you have some thoughts?
So I have some concerns based on everything that I've been analyzing over the past year or so. And honestly, when we examine the history of this country, my concerns continue to grow, because what I see are two polarized parties that are opposite each other. And in one sense, perhaps we see that as a good thing, because we're getting the representation of various perspectives, representation of various needs. But more and more what I see is the political process in this country as a charade. It is a system in place to distract people, to polarize sides so that nothing happens. And so we look specifically at this scenario where we've got a very intense right-wing Republican, Donald Trump, who's saying things that are extravagant, who's saying things that are huge, things that are unique, right? And it's rallying certain people that would have not paid attention before. The people who are disenfranchised with the whole political process, those right-wingers who would have just not have voted at all, now they're coming back into the game, and they're following Trump because he's saying things that are outrageous, and it's connecting with them. On the other hand, on the left side, we've got this socialist. We have Bernie Sanders, who before we wouldn't have really even paid attention to either, because he's so socialist, he's so left-wing. So what do we have right now? Two candidates that are completely polarized. And you have people that are so fed up with the political system in this country, and yet they are connecting to the far left and the far right, bringing them back in. And here is my concern and what I see. No real change is taking place in this country. People get focused on the charade and the circus of this political election instead of forcing through change. So those who would have stepped back and not voted and maybe would have gone about for other change now are caught up in the process of this charade. That's what I see. And over time, while we get caught up in the charade of the political system, nothing changes. But more liberties, more rights, more money are taken from us as normal, average American citizens. We look back to Ronald Reagan, who was the hero of the American political system back when he was here. I remember I loved him. He made our country strong. But at the same time, during Reagan's administration, he was Republican. He had what was called trickle-down economics, to where the political process was opened up. Businesses were given freedoms to take more and more money away from the average worker. Unions were downgraded so that people were making less and less money, okay? So he did good things, but I can see frustration with, Republicans at that level. We fast forward, over the years, we see the Clintons, we see the Bushes, and now we see Obama. At the same time, we have those same frustrations. But now we've got the integration of things like the Patriot Act, where more and more of our freedoms are taken away. Where they can enter our homes at any time just by deeming us as a terrorist, where they spy on all of our phones. So while we're distracted by these extremely flamboyant characters like Trump and Bernie Sanders, more and more of our freedoms, more and more of our money is being taken away. So I see, and my concern is, the political process is not in place to effect change. It is in fact in place to distract us and to give us the illusion of the power of a vote, when in fact we're really just voting for the same establishment over and over and over, which dumbs us down, which takes away our authority, and gives it more and more to the elite bankers and corporations who are actually in charge. That's my fear.
And I think we also see a shift from more of people in the presidential debates talking about actual issues to people bashing each other. And it's just a game to see who makes everyone else look the worst. And I think especially we can see that as we go back into the Lincoln-Douglas debates back during, the Civil War and things like that. Lincoln and Douglas debated about reform. They did debate about current issues and what the best ways to solve them, and actually talked about those. And we see a stark contrast in today's presidential debates when you have Trump calling Jeb Bush a lightweight, calling him out and just making him lose his credibility, instead of actually trying to put forth and convince people that building a wall is actually the right thing to do, that the Mexican government's going to agree and things like that. Instead, they just work on making each other look bad to make them look better to get the vote. And that way, people aren't aware or educated about the current issues that are actually happening in the world. They just see, hey, what he says sounds better than what this person's saying. Let's vote for this person instead.
The point you made about less focus on the actual views and more on bashing the other candidate is especially seen in today's time. Whenever you watch the Republican debates, there's so much less focus on what they're actually talking about. And, when you look at Donald Trump and when he emphasizes that he's going to build a wall or he's going to have a temporary ban on Muslims, he says these things, but there's no expansion on it. The Lincoln-Douglas debate was a brilliant thing, and it also in terms of when FDR laid out the New Deal, he had specific things that he wanted to do in order to fix the country, and they were very specific. But in today's modern politics, even Hillary Clinton gives broad views of what she wants to do. There's certain things that they either tend to avoid or tend to not expand upon because they know it's not in the interest of the American people. American people are more focused on watching them bash each other because it's fun. It's fun to watch.
And another issue is that the American people don't do anything about it. They don't do anything to question whether or not building a wall actually works. China built a wall, Mongols still invaded. It clearly didn't do anything for them. They ignore the complete flaw in Trump's plan on how is he going to get the Mexican government to agree. And they're satisfied with an answer like, oh, I'll get my people to do it. Don't worry about it. That's also what has caused this whole political process to become a charade and more of something that just is face value.
So in terms of geography, this political race is very important because whoever becomes the president will have a say in the future Supreme Court justices if anyone dies out in the next 8 years, which could happen. And we'll also have a say in the way that the government itself engages with other governments across the world. So this political race is more important than putting whoever you like in office. It relies on how will America carry itself in foreign policy and domestic policy, and how will we maintain relations overseas and with our neighbors.
Yeah, I think people really need to realize this isn't a game. It's not, this whole election thing isn't just some sort of circus where, oh, these people are funny, or this person seems like he's powerful, I can vote for him. You got to think of the prestigious and enormous role the president has in terms of being a commander-in-chief, being the leader of the free world, as you said, being in charge of us. Who do we want to lead us in the future? Who's going to fix the issues that we're passionate about? Ray, any last remarks?
Just vote third party. Vote for someone whose views align with you. Don't vote for the lesser of two evils. Don't vote for the shinier of two turds, okay? Vote for the one who you think will represent you for the best. And it's not just about voting the best president, all right? It's about senators. It's about congressmen. It's about local and state and all that stuff. The president, he doesn't have all the power in the country. He still has to comply with Congress. He still has to comply with the courts. And,
it's more important to realize what is actually useful in politics. Half the stuff that they show on TV, half the stuff they show on news is not important. It's just to draw people's interest into the candidate. What's more important is to recognize, okay, I believe in this. Let me go look up what's happening in terms of the candidates, of their views on this. Or, I think this is a problem. Is any candidate trying to fix this problem? Rather than say, oh, this candidate seems more powerful than this candidate, I'm going to go support him. Or everything that goes on in political news, half the stuff they talk about doesn't even pertain to, what you may believe in. So I think it's more important not only to follow politics, but to follow in a correct way where you're distinguishing what's really important to us. Patterson, you want to conclude?
Honestly, you touched on so much of what I was going to say. And I agree with both Ray and Bhargav. You said good things, where Bhargav, you said that we need to be concerned about what's going on in politics. And I agree with you. But I don't agree that we've been presented with candidates that are right for this country. I think that the media has presented us with crap. I think that we need to get off of our couches as people in this country and do things about it ourselves. Because TV shows us that if we sit back and we watch the flare of Hollywood media feelings and get to vote and get riled up for one political candidate, that they're going to solve something for us. The truth is, nothing's going to change this country until we as a people stand up and say enough is enough. We're not going to put up with the charade anymore. And so I echo what Ray is saying, that hey, yeah, we need a third party, not these two polarized parties that are presented to us by the media. We need real people that are going to make changes in this country all across the board. And that's never going to happen while we get caught up in the charade, the circus between the left and the right. Get off your couch. Let's do something about it.
Thank you so much for watching this Geopod episode. Thank you so much, Ray, for joining us. And tune in next time.